Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new session with Rights and Responsibilities Awareness Initiative. We are today very lucky to have Ernest Johansson, mental health expert, to talk to us about a very important and sensitive topic, which is understanding porn addiction in the digital age. Ernest, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. And addiction and mental health topics are very near and dear and important. And I really believe in spreading awareness and acknowledging that there is help. And so I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you, sir. So, what you can tell us about the porn addiction?
So, in i- initially, it's important to discuss that porn addiction is a subcategory of sex addiction, and it is something that is um, very much more prominent as widespread internet access is has proliferated.
Mhm.
Um, in the 90s, when everyone had dial-up, there wasn't the infrastructure for this type of addiction to be widespread. Not to say it didn't happen before. And as with all addictions, well, all addiction in general, there's the physiological component for chemical addiction. There's the psychological component, which is what the behavior is doing in the brain. What are the underlying psychological manifests? And they're usually assuaging feelings of emotional hurt or emotional inadequacy or not belonging or what have you. Addiction is essentially coping in a relatively maladaptive fashion with an underlying psychological trauma, condition, hurt. And then there's the behavioral component. What are the social behaviors or lack thereof associated with the addiction? For alcoholism, there's a lot of pro-social things associated with drinking. It's a social elixir. You see your buddies when you're having a few, so to speak. And then there are other addictions that are isolating, such as online porn addiction. Regarding online addiction or cybersex addiction, which is again a subcomponent of hypersexuality, there are seven different kind of recognized types. There is pornography, pornography addiction. Um, Basically is most commonly manifest by excessive viewing of porn, increased tolerance, and then with psychological withdrawal symptoms if one is not viewing porn. Then there is compulsive sexting, where people will send explicit sexualized messages and images, which often could be unwanted, which could lead to legal issues, and often is followed by guilt and potentially relationship issues. A third manifest of cybersex addiction is online erotic chat addiction, which is basically engaging addictively to sexualized chats. And this comes with obsessive behavior and an inability to stop and a neglect of real life duties, responsibilities, and relationships. Webcamming and live streaming addiction is the fourth type. It's addictively associating with online webcam services or live stream services. And there's a live person. Potentially it's AI, but I mean, that's another discussion. But generally, a live person on the other end. And this often causes significant financial problems as those services are quite expensive and they're designed to elicit further engagement. And if you throw that on top of an addictive pattern where the individual cannot stop, it causes significant financial losses. Then there is cybersexual gaming addiction or virtual reality addiction. Basically, immersive sexualized video games are available online, and this is an addictive relationship that again could be financially costly and certainly cause one to neglect real life roles and responsibilities. There's a sixth one, and this word is hard for me to say, teledildonics, which is a an addiction to virtual and physical remotely controlled sex toys that again has the trappings of addiction where the individual might not want the consequences but cannot control stopping. And then ultimately, the most common is the seventh type is a combined or multiple addiction related to sex addiction. So basically, most people who experience cybersex addiction will engage with more than one of these facets at once. And those are the seven types of cybersexual addiction. So to go in relatively quickly, um, porn addiction and online porn addiction is a subset of sexual addiction. And another term in sexual addiction is called hypersexuality. You'll often hear that term in medical discussion, hypersexuality, or in literature. And basically, like any addiction or any behavioral addiction, there's components of relatively normalized behavior. We did a discussion of shoplifting addiction earlier, and part of that was, you go to stores and buy things. That's a relatively normal behavior, and then there's a wider manifest that's maladaptive. And sex addiction, most human beings, some people are celibate, and that's part of the human diversity of human manifests. But for most people, there is a sexual component of their being, and porn addiction or sex addiction, rather in general, is a extreme extension of that. And um, so basically, what defines the relationship with sex, and this is the overview, and we'll get more specific to online porn, as an addictive thing. So one of the facets is the individual may have repeated and intense sexual fantasies, urges, and behaviors that take up a lot of their time. And key here is the individual may feel like these are not in their control. They don't have control over these feelings. Um, there's frequent drive or intense urges to engage in certain sexual behaviors. Um, that's often, if the behavior is engaged within, there's a deep sense of guilt or regret afterwards. And then another key feature is engaging or trying to reduce engaging in these behaviors, whatever they might be, um, but finding yourself unable to reduce engaging in these behaviors. And another key component is using these sexual behaviors as an escape or a management tool of managing feelings like anxiety, depression, loneliness, or just general stress. And while there are manifests of everyone's being where, it is relaxing to be with your partner, let's say, um, doing so in a way that is escapism is a sign that it might be an addictive behavior. And then another key feature, engaging in sexualized behaviors when they may be causing serious problems or may cause potentially a sexually transmitted infection or a loss of relationships, financial losses, loss of stable relationships, or damage to your personal relationships, or even legal problems. And then another component, which is a little bit redundant to what I said, is that people who experience sex addiction may very much struggle with maintaining healthy and stable relationships, including friendships or romantic relationships. Now, there's a few different things that might be key indicators of needing to go to a doctor for help. Those questions to ask oneself are, can the individual manage their sexual impulses? Are they distressed by their sexualized behaviors? Is their behavior hurting their relationships, causing problems at work, causing financial problems or legal problems? And this one's very important. Do they try to hide their behavior from trusted individuals in their lives? Now, there are many organizations that can offer help, but some of these narratives, some of the 3 points I'm going to present here are very helpful in terms of getting help. Shame and embarrassment are a part of any addictive behavior. Just know that when you're reaching out to a professional, there is not judgment. You're not going to be shamed for the behavior, but rather develop an understanding of where it comes from and why it happens and mechanisms to address it in a safe, healthy way. You're not alone. Many people are struggling with sexualized behavior. And as I stated at the onset of the video, the manifest of online sexual addiction is relatively new within the last 25, 30 years. And also, any mental health service or medical service you engage with is confidential, with the caveats being, credible threats of harm to self, credible threats of harm to others, a indication that there is a capacity to care for oneself that does not allow for safety, i.e. someone who can't take care of themselves in an extreme degree, and also a threat that children might be harmed and neglected. Beyond that is confidential. by law. In Canada, it's PHIPAA. In the United States, it's HIPAA. Those are those are that's legislation that protects the privacy of people receiving medical care, and mental health care falls under that umbrella as medical care. So specifically, um, online pet cyber sex addiction, which is a subcategory of hypersexuality or sex addiction. Um, again, so these are characteristics of it. There is a compulsion and a loss of control. The individual might spend a significantly long time engaging with these materials and not be able to control how much they engage with these materials. There's a high financial cost, especially with the use of webcams, in which they cost a lot of money, and people will engage with them compulsively to the point of harm, but still do so. And there's a relatively famous case in, I believe, New Jersey of someone who was a licensed nurse, and what had happened was he lost his license because he was stealing narcotics from the hospital he worked at and selling them. He wasn't using the narcotics addictively, but rather he was selling them for their street value, opioids specifically, and using that to fund his engagement with the cam girl. And when he lost his license, he stole from his family, mainly vis-a-vis credit cards, and then somehow took out a line of credit on the family home. And when all of these facets closed in on him to the point where he was going to get caught, he murdered his family. And I don't say that for shock value, but rather that is just how strong some of these manifests can be. Now, there's a sense of false intimacy. Addicts develop kind of a feeling of intimacy or even love towards, especially when they engage in the same cam models repeatedly. And it's a sense of like virtual intimacy that is fostered by the cam service in a way to extract money. And this in and of itself, that kind of para-romantic relationship is nothing new. It's been used to sell everything. It's in advertisements. Um, and it's in a lot of mediums and culture. But in particular, the degree of anonymity associated with webcams kind of exacerbates this effect. And then there's a lot of time spent searching for models to engage with or waiting for the availability of a particular chosen model to engage with. And there's a neglect of real life responsibilities, work and family, or whatever, responsibilities, including self-care, including maintenance of one's diet, that happens. And then these webcams are used to often people will kind of numb senses of loneliness, senses of a lack of connection or a lack of relationship. And it becomes self-manifesting because excessive engagement causes the problems that people are using it to assuage or mitigate in their mind emotionally. Now, webcams have a different kind of layer because they're two-way and interactive. Um, and people are less it's harder to quit because um there's a sense of a relationship with a person that isn't really real, mind you, but that's there. Additionally, there's more of a sense of anonymity, and this is actually a trap because people often rationalize that this engagement isn't cheating on their real world relationships because it's kind of a faux relationship. But ultimately it is in this manifest for sure. And then there's a lot of manifests of it that lend itself to uh, kind of compulsive behaviors. I want to add a piece before I get too much further, that being that in the modern world, people who are trafficking others and harming others by forcing them to engage in sex trade, the in particular women who are engaged as webcam models are very, very likely disproportionately to be trafficked themselves. And um, sometimes people have this narrative, it's an individual operator, and sometimes it is, but people have a narrative that it's an individual operator that's taking advantage of people. But typically, webcams are run by people who have more illicit activities associated with trafficking as well, and kind of often exist in a quasi-legal relation a quasi-legal existence or a very much gray area. And a significant number of the women that appear as cam models are themselves being exploited in trafficking. So I don't want to put out a false narrative that all if these bad people would stop doing it, there'd be less addicts. It it goes a little bit deeper than that. And again, this is a little redundant, but webcams they cause lots of excessive expenditures that are often kind of there's this pressure to keep them secret and which causes financial drain. And then the relationship with the webcam often is associated with job loss because it's such a compulsive behavior. It leads to significant emotional distrust in intimate relationships and potentially separation and divorce, which also has a significant degree of financial costs. And then the feelings of shame, anxiety, depression, and constitutional low self-esteem are exacerbated. Now, as I stated earlier, getting help. Um, there are therapists that specialized in sex addiction, and more there are therapists who specialize in web sex addiction. There are also blockers. Now, there's a caveat to this, but there are blockers that will disable webcams on devices or have kind of an accountability system, like we're talking on a webcam right now, obviously, and using it, appropriately for up and up reasons. But there are there's software that can put in a built-in accountability for webcam systems as well. Now, caveat being that these are only as good as the user's intent. Every barrier has a way around it. But a lot of addictive behaviors, there's a certain degree of impulse. And if you put up barriers, there is more of a window for the person who's trying to cease the behavior to catch themselves and rely on supports or rely on the skills they may have built in therapies or with their supports. Additionally, not only is professional therapy available, there's also 12-step groups, typically Sex Anonymous or sometimes referred to as S-Anon. And there's also a so there are support groups as well. Sorry, that's S-Anon. Support groups for the partners of people experiencing sexual addiction. And then there are also 12-step groups for the individuals experiencing sex addiction themselves. And also a peer support person who's also in recovery so that people can mutually and honestly monitor the other's behavior in a way where if they're both in recovery from this addiction, they um they kind of they know the ins and outs of keeping themselves accountable. Now, I don't want to give the notion that the this is something that would go away immediately if there wasn't the internet. It would manifest in different ways. However, there's a lot of problematic things about sexual behavior on the internet. A study 2019, 63%, or sorry, 68% of girls who are active online between the ages of 15 and 19 experienced sexual harassment online, including 53% of unwanted sexualized messages and 36% unwanted pictures. So this is something that is part of the internet landscape and is something that manifests in very negative ways. Um, More likely males are more likely to be engaging in this addictive behavior, but certainly women do too as well. So I don't want to give out that message. And so as with other addictions, without shame, as best you can, obviously, reach out to professionals for help. Therapies such as CBT, and there are some medications as well. And then support groups are all known to be effective against this addiction. And the bottom line with any addiction, if one is engaging in a behavior where they don't want the consequences of the behavior but cannot stop themselves, that is the red flag indicator that this is an addiction. Thus, you know, that's when to seek help if you can. And sometimes people get well past there without seeking help, but that is a good question to bravely ask yourself honestly. Is this true of me? And if it is, reach out for help. And I hope this has been informative. There are there is as much help as there is for addictive behaviors. Um, Please reach out to it. And this is something that can derail lives financially, emotionally, um, but there is help available and people do recover. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ernest, for this important and informative presentation on this topic. And of course, we always encourage people to reach out for help. We all would need some help at certain point of our time. So, and help is there. So
That's right.
please reach out. There is no shame. There is no judgment. There is always people who want to help and to make things better for you. So if you got into any of those situations, there are a lot of good and great people that are ready to help and support you.
That's right.
Thank you so much again, Ernest, for this, and for everyone with us. Thank you for joining us tonight. Stay well, stay safe, and we are looking forward to see you at another session with Rights